By the age of 20, okay, he succeeded his father, Philip II, to the throne.
Yeah, and they don't fight. They're never in the front.
Never.
No, I don't even think Alexander the Great was in the front.
For over 2,000 years, the world has searched for one of history's greatest lost treasures, the tomb of Alexander the Great. Explorers, archaeologists, and treasure hunters have scoured deserts, cracked ancient texts, and chased whispers across continents. Now, buried beneath the streets of Morden Alexandria, a new clue has surfaced, one that could rewrite everything we thought we knew. And surprisingly, Joe Rogan may have been right all along. Before we get into what Joe Rogan got right and why it's actually kind of wild, we need to rewind back to ancient times. You've probably heard of Alexander the Great, right? Conqueror of worlds, undefeated in battle, and basically a human storm in sandals. But here's the thing nobody really talks about. For someone so heroic, no one could ever find his tomb. It was one of history's biggest mysteries, buried deeper than his own legend. Where is Alexander the Great's body? This is the kind of question that sounds easy at first. A man dies, he's buried, and history moves on. But this isn't just any man. This is Alexander the Great. He was a man who carved out an empire from Greece to India before the age of 33. Not just was he a great warrior, he was a military genius and a symbol of power. At some point in his life, he was believed to be a demigod. And yet, over 2,000 years later, no one can say for sure where his body is. Alexander the Great died in Babylon in 323 BC at only 32 years old. While the details surrounding his death are still debated, some historians believe that he died from a strange illness. But others believe that Alexander was too great a man to die of an illness and believe that he was poisoned. But what we know for sure is that the moment he died, the world didn't know what to do with his body. His last wish was to be buried at the Oracle of Siwa in Egypt, the same place where he was declared the son of Zeus Ammon. To him, it was a final resting place worthy of his divinity. That was where he belonged. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Somewhere along the way, his funeral plans got literally hijacked. One of his most loyal generals, Ptolemy, intercepted the procession and carried Alexander's body. He had no ulterior motives of any kind. In fact, he only tried to protect Alexander because in those days, whoever held Alexander's remains could claim a piece of his legacy. Thus, Ptolemy took the body to the city he thought Alexander belonged, Alexandria, Egypt. I mean, what better place other than the city Alexander himself had built? For a while, it became a place of pilgrimage. Roman emperors made detours just to see the tomb. Julius Caesar, Augustus, and even Caligula visited the tomb. It wasn't hidden at all. If at all, it was more of a sacred monument that was open for everyone to honor. Legend has it that Caesar wept when he stood before Alexander's coffin and Caligula stole the conqueror's armor from the tomb and wore it. And then, as years went by, the tomb somehow got lost in time. By the 4th century AD, all records of the tomb just vanished. There were no directions, records, or any written clues that would help anyone who wanted to see the tomb find it. It was quite difficult to trace where the tomb was, because as years went by, Alexandria had changed. With earthquakes hitting and religious revolutions sweeping through, the city got buried under its own history. By the time modern archaeologists tried to find the tomb again, they were working blind. It's insane to think about how the tomb of the greatest conqueror in human history just disappeared. No tomb or body in sight. Not even a possible clue of where it might be. For something that was once such a public and sacred space, it was very disturbing. And that's where the mystery gets interesting. What if the tomb didn't simply get lost? What if someone wanted it hidden and never to be found? Because as we're about to see, the clues were indeed buried, and someone was determined to dig them up. A trail of clues buried beneath Alexandria. If Alexander's tomb was ever real, and not some legend built up over centuries, then the one place it could possibly still be hiding is in Alexandria, the city he built. If the tomb existed, it would have been under our feet this whole time. Now, the tricky part is that searching in modern-day Alexandria isn't exactly easy. Morden Alexandria is a busy, crowded, working city with apartment buildings stacked above ancient ruins and cars driving across streets that once led to royal courts. Today, the city's grounds, once covered in sand, are now layered with concrete, water lines, and sewage systems. So even if you knew where to dig, good luck getting a shovel in the ground without hitting a utility pipe. Even with all of these restrictions, someone tried anyway. That someone was Calliope Limnaeos Papacosta, a Greek archaeologist who made it her life's work to chase the ghost of Alexander's final resting place. Even with the data in hand, getting permission to dig wasn't easy. Years passed, permits were delayed, and political tension between local officials and foreign researchers stalled the process. At one point, it seemed like the chamber might stay buried forever, because at one point, no one wanted to deal with what it might mean if it actually was. And yet, Papacosta didn't give up. Her team kept gathering evidence, quietly building support from institutions and city planners. They worked with residents, went through miles of red tape, and stayed patient when most would have walked away. All the while, the city moved on around them, unaware of what might be sleeping below. Then, finally, after years of waiting, the excavation started. Soon after, they stumbled upon something that changed the trajectory of history as we know it. What they uncovered next wasn't what they expected. It was more. After a long time searching Alexandria's Shalat gardens, the team uncovered something astonishing. Buried 8 meters deep in Hellenistic debris lay a marble statue which was about 80 centimeters tall. It was a statue of a naked young warrior in a classical pose. It had 1 foot raised, with its head and torso remarkably intact, except for a small chip on the nose. But the real surprise came months later when his hand, found separately months later, was curled tightly around what had once been a spear. The craftsmanship was delicate yet powerful, veins and muscle subtly carved with lifelike precision. It wasn't hard to identify that the statue was indeed a spear bearer. It matched the artistic style of Lysippus, the man who was Alexander's personal sculptor during his lifetime. Lysippus crafted a visual identity that went beyond mere likeness. That spear-bearer pose was reserved for someone heroic, legendary, and royal. Who other than Alexander himself? But then came something stranger. Just a few meters away, they hit a stone road. This was the kind of road emperors during the Roman period had once walked on. Finding this road felt like a step in the right direction, as it only meant that there were other astonishing artifacts to be found. Discovering the statue was a huge success for them. It was a sign that they were digging in the right place. When asked what kept her going all those years without a major breakthrough, her answer wasn't the usual answer anyone would expect. Instead, she spoke about the weight of history and how every fragment they uncovered felt like a quiet nudge in the right direction. She said the past had a way of leaving traces, and it was her job to notice them, and her expeditions had started to take shape. Because as we go further, finding the statue was only the beginning. Something else was buried deeper, something no one expected to find. The chamber that changed everything. No one was ready for what they saw beneath the excavation site. The chamber Calliope Papacosta's team had uncovered was real. It was ancient, and the details inside pointed to something that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. The weathered walls had carvings with faint traces of murals showing gods and battle scenes. Not only that, there were remnants of gold leaf along the edge of a broken pedestal. It was clear that this chamber wasn't some sort of storage or a sewer tunnel. It had a sacred and ceremonial feel to it, but after a thorough search, they had reached a dead end once again. However, this wasn't the first time archaeologists had faced a chamber that seemed to lead to Alexander and then pulled away. Back in 1977, over 500 miles away in northern Greece, another discovery had sent a similar feeling through the archaeological world. In the ancient city of Aigai, which is now modern-day Virginia, archaeologist Manolis Andronikos uncovered a royal burial site that turned out to be one of the most significant finds in Greek history. The entrance was sealed with the stairway carved from solid earth. Inside were painted walls, gold crowns, weaponry, and 2 cremated bodies, which were believed to be King Philip II and one of his wives. The tomb, once inside, revealed faded Hellenistic columns and faint frescoes of gods and warriors, but alive with energy. They also found golden wreaths, weapons, and 2 burial urns. One belonged to a woman and the other to a man believed to be Philip II, Alexander's father. And yet, the design of another nearby tomb seemed a lot different. It was way smaller and looked nothing like a royal tomb. Some experts pointed to signs that it may have held Alexander's remains at one point, maybe secretly, maybe temporarily. Could the real tomb have been moved there, or could it still be hiding in Aigai's hills? The theories spun from there. Some believed Alexander's body had been relocated by political enemies. Others thought the tombs in Alexandria and Vergina were both part of a larger, fractured burial story. I mean, there were 2 places, one man, and no clear answer. Still, the most recent chamber discovery brought fresh questions because the historical details all pointed to the excavation site as the right location. And all it missed was a body. Was this finally the end of the road? Or was it a decoy meant to keep the truth buried? And oddly enough, this falls in line with something Joe Rogan once suggested. A theory that was laughed off when he said it, but now even the experts might just have a change of heart. Joe Rogan's wild theory. Joe Rogan wasn't exactly trying to be a part of history when he leaned into one of his famous aspects of ancient civilizations. He was just doing what he always does, which was pulling threads. Whether it was the pyramids, the Library of Alexandria, or lost cities in the jungle, Rogan liked to ask the kind of questions most historians sidestep. So, naturally, at some point, the topic of Alexander the Great came up. In one of those freewheeling conversations, he started talking about what might still be buried under cities like Alexandria. He hinted at the possibility of finding vaults of knowledge, lost scrolls, maybe even tombs no one wants us to find. But it wasn't all that serious. He seemed to have speculated and joked more than affirmed the possibility of finding anything. Because now, with archaeologists making legitimate discoveries beneath Alexandria and chambers turning up that align suspiciously well with ancient accounts, people are listening to that old clip again with fresh ears. The idea that someone might have found, or at least come close to Alexander's tomb and then covered it up doesn't feel so far-fetched anymore. Rogan's guests over the years have added fuel to that curiosity. From fringe historians to military theorists, they've stirred the pot of a world finding not just weapons or armory from ancient times, but information as well. There has been speculation that a tomb like Alexander's could contain more than bones. Some believe it could also hold scrolls that predate known civilization. These scrolls possibly preserved rituals, relics, or maps to places long erased from textbooks. Others jumped on the idea that Alexander's body was moved intentionally. They think that it was hidden and not lost in order to protect the artifacts he was buried with. Theories ranged from ancient priesthoods to secret societies, all working to keep certain knowledge sealed off from the modern world. While most historians would roll their eyes at that, it's hard to ignore how much remains unsolved. However, one of these theories has been proven, and some probably never will be. But what makes them fascinating is the unusual pattern. Every time someone gets close to real answers about Alexander's tomb, the trail seems to vanish or something just happens. And in moments like that, even a wild Rogan quote starts to sound reasonable. Even though Joe Rogan has chatted about underground secrets and ancient mysteries, he's never actually joked about finding Alexander's tomb. At first, those theories were jokes and fantasies people laughed about because they sounded too far-fetched. The idea of secret tunnels and missing tombs guarded by forgotten knowledge was hilarious. It made for good late-night conversations or podcast banter, but nobody expected archaeology to come knocking. When news broke that archaeologists in Alexandria had located what appeared to be a sealed chamber buried beneath an old neighborhood right where ancient texts once claimed Alexander's tomb had stood, The reaction online was immediate. Even some experts began to acknowledge the value of public curiosity. Sure, the online takes were split. Not all of them got the facts right. But the buzz was helping revive interest in one of history's oldest cold cases. People who'd never cared about ancient Greece were suddenly diving into documentaries, books, and museum websites, hungry to know more. And that brings us to the real reason this discovery matters, the question that pulls us in deeper. Not where Alexander's body ended up, but who he really was. Before he was a legend, he was just a young man in the palace at Pella. Before he became a warrior, he was a regular student and son. So how did he go from Macedonian prince to the most legendary conqueror the world has ever known? How does one man still hold the world's attention over 2,000 years after his death? Alexander the Great. Alexander wasn't always a legend. He was just a boy born in a palace in Pella, northern Greece, in 356 BC. His father was King Philip II, a brilliant military leader, and his mother, Olympias, believed her son was destined for something far greater than the throne. By the time he was a teenager, he was being tutored by Aristotle, and by 20, he was king. And from there, history started to move at his pace. Alexander won wars differently. Not only that, he took how wars were fought to another level. He devised brilliant plans and strategies at Gaugamela, Issus, and the siege of Tyre, which were years ahead of their time. He outflanked enemies with speed, used terrain like a weapon, and inspired loyalty so fierce that his soldiers crossed deserts and mountains without blinking. In less than a decade, he built one of the largest empires the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece to Egypt, from Babylon to the edge of India. With all the wars he won, Alexander had a plan to merge all the nations he had conquered. He married Persian women. In fact, he took 3 wives. Each were daughters of the kings of the regions he conquered. He did that for political moves to expand his colony and also to unite 2 worlds and legitimize his rule in the East. And because of this, 70 cities were named after him. The most popular city that was named after him was Alexandria in Egypt, was built to be the center of the world he dreamed of. One of the historical aspects that speaks of Alexander was his journey to the Siwa oasis, deep in the Egyptian desert. His stay in the desert was far more than he expected. Something unexpected happened. At the temple of the Oracle of Amun, the priests greeted him as if he were a god. After that moment, the line between man and myth started to blur. Coins began to show him with curved ram's horns. The symbol of Amun, statues even gave him divine features, and temples were built in his honor. After years of non-stop conquest, from crossing deserts to conquering empires, Alexander's army was worn thin, and so was he. He had returned to Babylon in 323 BC to plan his next campaign, this time to take over Arabia. But before he could begin, he fell ill. What truly happened to him has been debated over the years. Some say it began after a long night of drinking, and others suggest he had a fever that never broke. For nearly 2 weeks, he lay on his bed, fully conscious but unable to speak. His generals stood by his bedside, helpless, and then, without naming the next successor, he died. Long after he died, emperors like Augustus and Caligula visited his tomb to pay tribute to his greatness. And when time passed, it was only right to preserve his tomb in a place where it couldn't easily be seen, and maybe that's why it's taken so long to find it. While the discovery may not have been what everyone had hoped for, it brings us closer than ever to solving the greatest archaeological mystery of all time. What do you think was buried with Alexander? And what happens if the world isn't ready for what's found next? Let us know in the comments. Do well to like this video. Also hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell on our channel so you never miss any of our uploads. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen to watch more videos like this one.